You are listening to Cracking Mum Maths. This podcast does not take into consideration your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Before acting on any information, you should consider the appropriateness of the information provided and the nature of the relevant financial product, having regard to your objectives, financial situation, and needs.
Welcome back to Cracking Mum Maths, where we try and get you to focus in on your finances so you don't end up poor and homeless.
Natalie, poor and homeless.
Bianca, Tay Tay is she's in Melbourne right now.
Honestly, the hype right now that's in Melbourne.
Bianca, can you believe we didn't get tickets?
Oh, I can. All the time, the effort that we spent sitting online trying to get tickets. I heard the other day on the radio, one girl, all 3 concerts she got tickets to.
Yeah, see, that's not fair. Like, we deserve Taylor Swift tickets. But look, we could do a whole episode on Taylor. We could talk about the lost productivity and the amount of hours we spent trying to get tickets. Mm-hmm. We could talk about how much people spent on tickets and the merchandise.
That's a whole other topic on itself.
It is. And we could also talk about the fact that old Mayor Sally Cap reckons Taylor's bringing $1.2 billion to the Melbourne economy.
That honestly doesn't surprise me because I've heard there are so many people flying internationally into Australia just to see her in concert.
I mean, Tay Tay, I love you, but don't make me waste hours of my time trying to get tickets for your show, okay? But look, just like Taylor Swift has an era tour, we too, as mums and as families, have eras, Bianca.
That's exactly right. We all go through different eras or phases in life.
So I wanted to tackle this one mainly because Taylor Swift was in town and it'd be rude not to. But secondly, because last year you actually said something that really resonated with me, and you knew of someone who was selling their house and they were deliberating over whether or not they should accept the deal that came through, the offer that was put through. And your question was, is it what you need?
Is it enough? Is the offer that's on the table enough to satisfy your financial needs? Take the emotion out of it. Everyone thinks their house is worth more than it is, but the offer on the table, is that enough? That was our discussion.
And that's what it's resonated with me so much, Bianca, because I feel like as a society, we've become obsessed with, I should get this. I need more. This is worth more. But at the end of the day, it's what do you need? And if you have your life map, you know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. So I want to tackle this because I think it plays a huge role in the day-to-day running of families. It's the what do we need versus this. And it's not greed like a very negative, I'm not saying it's a negative greed. It's this
pressure, added pressure that you put on yourself because you think you should be at a certain point in your life or a phase in your life. You should have so much in the bank or so many properties or tens of thousands of dollars in an investment portfolio, whatever it might be. I get it. You feel the pressure and the need to be that one step ahead of where you are.
And I think it's so important for mums and for families to really stop and think about what's your era.
I think it's important to recognise, Nat, that in those eras, your financial needs will change in accordance to sort of what's happening then and there. And that's okay. That's the one thing we need to remember. It's okay if for this period of time, things are going to change slightly.
That's so true. And I love the Resilience Project. I don't know if you've listened to their podcast, but I'm pretty sure it was them who said it's being in tune with your season. And that goes for your finances as well.
That's exactly right. So let's pick the first era, if you want to call it that people generally struggle the most with, and that's going off onto maternity leave.
Absolutely. And I was just having a conversation last week with a friend who's on maternity leave, and she said she really dislikes not making her own money.
Yeah, it's an adjustment, especially for people who have always been pretty independent, right? So you go out and you earn an income, and it could be a joint income with your partner, and you might still pool that income together, but it's still your income and your contribution, and it's really hard for women to let go of that.
Yeah, I'm in that boat. I hate not making money. Being in our maternity leave era, what are some things that we need to look at to best prepare us?
I think the key to start with is be okay with the fact that you're in your maternity era, right? You potentially have worked up until that point and you're used to bringing home an income. And that's the hardest part. You all of a sudden have to take a step back and you're not bringing in or contributing to the household. So it's important to make peace with that and be okay with that. But what that does mean is you need to plan, right? You need to plan ahead and make this time more palatable for your whole family. So set a temporary budget to cope with the reduction in your income. It's really important that you're on the same page with your partner about where you can cut back or need to cut back because your income obviously has reduced. But to that point, it's really important that you do investigate your potential entitlements.
Yeah, so what does that look like, Bianca? Because I know it changes all the time. It's different now to when we were on maternity leave. So what do you need to look into?
It's probably best just to start with MyGov, right? Go onto MyGov and see what entitlements are there that you potentially can get. So the government obviously offers a whole range of maternity leave entitlements for you and your partner. Don't forget your partner is entitled to a few things as well. And that helps both parties, right? Because all of a sudden, if you are entitled to something, there is some sort of income coming in. And I should probably preface that in saying it's not going to be your income, right? It's not your full-time income that you were earning before you went on leave. It is essentially minimum wage is what the government pays you for a 16-week period. It might be 18 now. So have a look into essentially what you're entitled to. The other thing to do is go to your employer. Some employers out there are really ahead of the curve and they have a really good maternity leave policy, and there might be others out there that don't for whatever reason. They're a small business and they just can't afford to do that, which is fine. But go and speak to your employer and see what you can either negotiate or what's already in your contract from a leave perspective. And then take those numbers and go, okay, is there a way I can, to some degree, manipulate these numbers? You are entitled to the government leave. You're entitled to potentially your employer leave.
And your husband could potentially get parental leave from their workplace too.
100%, right? So then line those up and go, right, if the first one kicked off and it goes for however many weeks, call it 16 or 18 weeks, can I then time for the second lot of leave that I'm entitled to via your employer, for arguments? Can that then kick off at that point and see you through for another period of time? You might even be able to negotiate with your employer to have it at half pay, which will then extend that again. So as we said, it's looking at what can potentially come in and how can you work that to your best advantage.
So it's really looking at the timing of these things as well and determining when you need these payments and see how you can elongate the time at home with your baby. So it might mean that your husband takes their leave when you go back to work and that, gives you a couple of months without childcare, or, you use your employer payments and then followed by the government pays, however you want to divvy it up, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think what's important is being on the same page from the start, right? So if you have all that information at hand and you can work out how long you can be off work for, then that makes it a lot easier for you, one, to plan, but two, to understand collectively as a family how long this is going to last for, right? And that could be fluid. You might decide to take 12 months off initially, and then for whatever reason it extends to 18 months or 24 months. That's fine. It's just having that discussion, being on the same page, and then flexing that budget to suit what's happening at the time, because it's going to change, depending on when these payments start and end. And if you don't have that ability to elongate them for whatever reason and you need to go back to work, well, then that's at that point, it's time for me to consider my next steps or my next era.
That's great, Bianca, because once you have a financial timeline of how long you can take off, then you can really try and be at ease and think about the emotional side of returning to work, because it can be a really challenging time going back to work after having a baby, but it can also be quite stressful when you're at home on maternity leave, particularly when there might be a offhanded comment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we need to remember is to be kind on ourselves and think about the language that we're using during this era. So that flippant comment that men or women, when they walk in the door and they go, what have you done all day?
100%. There's little comments like, or When do you think you'll go back to work?
Yeah.
Those little digs.
You know what it is? It's they've internalized to that point the pressure they're feeling to be able to maintain potentially the lifestyle that you guys have had before kids. So they don't realize that flippant question, which might ease their anxiety, is actually causing a greater stressful anxiety.
No, I think it's really fair because it is a challenging time. It can be a really challenging time being on maternity leave because, you know, you are trying to adjust your life to this new era. You don't have as much income coming in. So that might mean that you can't do the things that you used to do, or, you know, it's the irony is when you're working, you don't really have time to spend your money. And then when you're not working, you have all the time in the world, but you've got no money to spend.
I like that one. That's so true.
It's true. And particularly on maternity leave, like there are times where you're trying to fill the day and you're like, oh, we'll go out for coffee and then we'll get lunch and then we'll go to sensory time, which is, you know, people are charging like $40 a class for these kids to touch feathers. I mean, like,
well, it is a juggle, but I think that's where your budget comes back in, right? So for those people on maternity leave, they can go, okay, I know my budget has flex to be able to spend, whether it's $50 a week or $100 a week. So that gives them the peace of mind that I'm not actually taking us backwards by doing these activities.
Yes. I wish I'd done that when I was on maternity leave and been like, okay, this is my budget for this week, so that means I can do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Instead, sometimes I would be like a little bit panicked, like, oh, I don't have my income coming in. I just feel like I'm spending heaps of money.
Yeah, and it works both ways, right? So someone else is out there, your other half, working, and they're seeing you going out and doing these activities with this little baby, and they're thinking, can we afford this, right? I'm working really hard. I'm bringing in money. She's not working right now, and she's off doing that. So it works both ways in the sense of he now goes, okay, no, I know because we have a budget that she can go off and do those things and it's not going to hurt us. Because the key really is don't go backwards. You can have the status quo and you can sort of simmer along where you're at, but as long as you're not putting yourself further into debt because you're spending more while your income is down, that's the key. Just try and keep the status quo. If you can go forward, great. And if you can't, that is okay.
It's okay because you will have your next era, which is returning to work. How can we advise our listeners to set themselves up for this return?
I think it's not a financial thing they need to think about. It's more an emotional thing. When are you ready to go back to work is the first thing. And it's not necessarily going to make financial sense to go back to work, but people need to for their own mental health.
Absolutely. And it's not just, it's mental health, but it's also being in that workforce, keeping up with the workforce, keeping up with technology, and then meaning that you can advance your career. So it's not just looking at, you know, childcare expenses versus your income. I think that notion should just be eliminated.
Yeah, definitely. But you need to then think about, okay, or you need to investigate. So what are my childcare costs? Do I get a rebate back from the government? Because that is there and that is available. And that's a minefield in itself. The forms.
CCS, Centrelink. I tell you what, the amount of hours I've spent. I actually have a screenshot on my phone of the longest hold time on Centrelink, and it was 3 hours.
Jeez, you're good. I would have hung up, I reckon, after an hour and a half.
When you cop a 5K bill from them, Bianca, you would hang on for dear life.
So let's all plan so that doesn't happen, guys.
Yeah, so a hot tip is with the CCS, you need to have an income estimate. So they base your rebate off your income. So the hot tip is to overestimate what you're going to make as opposed to underestimate. It's really challenging for my husband and I. We're freelancers. We have no idea what we're going to make in a year. And it's not something that I update all the time. I just don't. So if you underestimate, you will cop a massive bill at the end. But if you overestimate, they will reimburse you at the end of financial year. So have a think about that first and foremost. And then Bianca, it's about looking at what are your childcare options.
Hot tip 2.0 to that. They will reimburse you when you do your tax tax return. So if you know you're being owed money while you're on maternity leave, or just you've returned to work and your child's in childcare, then it might be worthwhile to get your taxes done sooner rather than later.
Yes, good, Bianca, because how great would a tax return of a couple of grand be while you're on mat leave?
And just think of it as forced savings, because you don't have the income coming in to spend because the government's holding it back for you. So just think of it as a little bit of a forced savings plan for the year, and then you might have a little surplus at the end.
Back to childcare, it would be really beneficial looking into, okay, how many days are you going to return to work? What does the childcare makeup look like? What are the fees associated with that? And then work out what the difference is.
And rework that budget. So remember we said before that budget is fluid and will change with every era. So rework that budget now, knowing what the new income level will be. Whether you go back to work full-time, part-time is irrelevant. It's what's the income coming in, and then let's flex our expenses again to match that.
Yes. Now, for anyone who has a child at childcare or about to be involved in the childcare world, watch those invoices. You actually have to keep on top of what you're being charged. And one other note is Centrelink, they're big letter senders. So once again, I have a letter appearing in my letterbox, and it irritates me anytime someone sends me a letter. Okay, note to you, Bianca, don't ever send me a letter into my letterbox.
Oh, I don't think I'll ever do that. That is too funny.
But it's really difficult going back to work full stop.
Yeah, and I think we need to remember that you are going into another era. So let's call it your transition back to work or your part-time work era, right? So we need to remove that pressure on ourselves to go back to work full-time immediately. But what that then means is you need to flex that budget again. So you've managed to get through maternity leave on one salary. Now there's some more income coming in. And although it might not be your full-time salary because you're not working 5 days a week, it's something. So let's flex that budget again now that there's some more income in. And you can get through this. And you need to once again sit down together and rework the budget and be on the same page. And that will essentially eliminate everyone's stress level, because that's what it is. It's the stress of not understanding where you're at in life. And if you can have a plan and have a budget and you can stick to that, then it should eliminate some of the pressure on everyone.
All about pressure and, going back to that being in tune with your era as well, and making sure, because there's nothing worse than you might be making all the money in the world, but you're unhappy. And I actually recall it really hit me like a ton of bricks one day where I was working my dream job. Archie was about 18 months and I was on a location recce in a park, and I see these two mums pushing their pram, walking their babies, and it was like a stab in my stomach. And I was like, I don't want to be here. I want to be there. Mm-hmm. I want to be at home with my son. And it was like this, what am I doing? So then all of a sudden it was like, this money that I'm making is not enough for me right now.
No, money is not everything. You're right, Nana. It's one of those things where we work hard, whether you're male or female. You might go to university, you might do a trade. You work really hard to build your career, and you think that that's the be all and end all, right? And then you have these little munchkins come along, and you go, oh, hang on a minute. Maybe that dream of CEO isn't quite what I was thinking. But I would argue that there comes a point in time where for some people that will reverse back to, okay, it's time for me to build my career again.
Yes, and I'd love to talk more about that, Bianca, because there is this kind of notion and this pressure that we need to have everything now. We need to be the best mum ever, but we need to work on our career and we need to be successful and we need to be making a certain amount of money and we have to have the house and maybe a swimming pool and the cars and the everything. But if you can take a step back and to think about your life in seasons, it almost takes the pressure off to be like, you know what? I could take a decade out of my career and perhaps work part-time or take time off and really be there for my family when they're young in those really like those foundation years where it's really, really important. And it's really hard. They're really hard to raise when they're little kids. I'm sure it gets harder as teenagers, but
I'm sure that's a whole different set of problems. I think the key, Nat, is as long as you're not going backwards. So if you end up with the same status quo for 5 years because your income coming in just meets all your expenses out and you're not quite making inroads into those bigger goals that you've set yourself, that's okay because you're in this season and this phase, right? And you will come up to a point in time where you will enter that next season or phase where you can ramp it up because your kids are that little bit more independent. They can get themselves to school and come home, and it's okay if you're not home until 5:30 or 6 o'clock and they can put some tea on. That's the era where you ramp it up now and you start to try and concentrate on those financial goals again that you'd set originally and just go hell for leather at making them work.
Yes, I love that because time is not up for us just because, we've had kids. And I also feel like if you've gotten to a certain point in your career once, you can do it again. And you could probably bring a lot more to your role or your job. So I'm excited for that, and it has made me chill a little bit. You will have your time again to be in your slay era.
That's exactly it.
Where you're just going to absolutely slay. So, Bianca, for our wonderful listeners who are in this stage of their life where they haven't yet had kids, what would you suggest to, I guess, arm them with some advice before they go into the trenches?
Too funny. I think if you're at that point in your career or your life where there's a potential that you might have a family or you want to take some time out. Some people take time out and don't have a family, but they just need that mental break. I think you need to plan for that. So if right now, just do everything you can to build that bit of that war chest because it will actually make these areas easier knowing that you had some forethought to plan for them. Have fun, pump that career and work really hard, but know that there will come a point in time where potentially you will need to wind back slightly, and that is okay, and you've planned for it. You've got that war chest there that gives you the ability to take some time out. So I would probably just say have it on the back of your mind and sort of plan a little bit for the fact that there will come a point in time where income will drop, and that's okay.
We need to carve out some time to just sit and make peace with our era. So on that note, we go to our favourite segment, Delegate or Eliminate. Bianca, what are you delegating or eliminating this week?
Alrighty, so this week I am really struggling to finish a book that I started and I just want to push through and get it done. So I have decided I'm eliminating the physical book and I'm going to move to an audiobook. I'm going to listen to the rest of this book in the car via Audible to listen to the remaining last 3 or 4 chapters I think that I've got to go because I just want to get it done.
Bianca, that is golden advice for people who want to finish a book and have no time to read a book.
Yeah.
Don't let time hold you back. If you want to read a book, get Audible to read it for you.
Perfect. What are you eliminating or delegating, Nat?
So, Bianca, you've been very busy this week, so I've not filled you in on the goss of my life.
The goss of your life?
So, look, I've had a week. My son has been at primary school for exactly 6 days, and I've already had a meeting with the principal.
You have not.
So I want to eliminate my constant need for just being a pest.
Oh my gosh. Now, what did you talk to the principal about in the first 6 days?
Oh, look, it's just, this is my life, right? I could describe myself as I'm a council caller. I'm the type of person that calls the council. You're either a council caller or you're not.
I am not.
See what I mean? So my son has been enrolled in a Catholic primary school, and I went along to the first mass, the welcome mass to the new preps, I was outraged.
Oh, no.
Outraged, Bianca.
It's a Catholic school now.
So I tell you what, I went straight to that principal and I was like, we've got a problem here. And then I called the priest as well.
You did not?
Yes. I had a conversation with the priest. Again, I've been at this school for 6 days.
Holy moly. They're going to see you coming this week and be like, there is that woman. Quick, hide.
And you know what? I started off by being like, don't be a psycho, Nat. Just don't be a psycho, Mum. But I can't help it. If I'm outraged by something, I'm outraged. But okay, this is what I'm eliminating though, because I 100% don't have time to be a pest.
No, you don't.
I don't have time. So I am going to try and eliminate this constant need
to be involved in everything.
So that's what I'm really going to try and focus on. I'm going to be more like you, the type of person that does not call the council constantly.
Oh, you are too funny.
So Bianca, because I love soap operas, can you give us a recap of what we just discussed? And also because our audience are very busy parents doing a million things at once, give us a recap.
Sure. So I think the recap at the moment is recognize what era you're in and be okay with that. Remove the pressure of being in the era by planning ahead. That's your key. Trying to be on the same page with your partner is really important, and changing the language of the day so that you guys aren't inadvertently attacking one another while you're in this era. But the key, I guess, from a financial perspective is just try not to go backwards. So if the status quo stays, that's okay for a few years. Just try not to put yourself into further debt. And that essentially means just living to your means.
All right. Well, for your homework this week, we want you to sit down and just think about your era and if you're set up for this era. So make sure it really goes back to your deficit or surplus, but make sure you have a conversation and you're all at peace with your era because it's Eras Tour.
Good old Tay Tay.
If you got a ticket to Tay Tay, love that for you. So Bianca, we'll see you next week.
See you then. Bye.